and satisfied. Now, Sasta cottages couldn't be further away from the business that I was used to. I got 40 years in construction, and I started off. I left Ireland when I was 11 years of age. A lot of people say we didn't because we should have that Kerry accent. And there's a reason why I never lost my Kerry accent. I had to leave this country when I was 11. My mother died of cancer, and I was sent to London. I was sent to an auntie in London, and it was the biggest shock in my life. I'd never been out of Kerry. I was in Killarney once, and I was put on a boat, a train on the boat, and I arrived in London on a Friday evening, I remember, in Paddington Station. And I was at school one Monday morning in a school called Canon Hinsley School in Harleston. And it was the biggest shock I ever came across in my life. I could not believe it. A man from the mountain winding up inside the city. And I was absolutely devastated. And I'll always remember my accent. Everyone was Cockney. They were all Cockney accents. And I was called everything. A thick Irish paddy, good for nothing, the lot. And it was a terrible time. And I remember the one saving grace I had was, I was very fit, I was very strong. I came from the mountain. And there was a sports field. And we were playing football. And I remember looking at the goalpost, and I thought, they're a funny goalpost, they have no uprights. And it was soccer. It was a soccer pitch. And I didn't know the first thing about soccer, and we'd start playing football. And I'd always remember, if I got the ball, I'd go with it, I'd run with it. And all I could hear him saying, that fucking paddy's offside. I still, every time I hear him offside, I think, that fucking paddy is offside. I was very strong, I was very happy, and I used, that's why I had no time for soccer. I have to say this, I'm a rugby man, I'm a Gaelic football man. I wouldn't watch a soccer match only if it was, I had to know if it was in front of me. But I remember the deputy headmaster in the school was Mr. Casey. And I don't know if some of you remember, there was a very famous Kerry strongman from Sneed, the Caseys of Sneed. They were famous wrestlers, famous boxers, and they were famous oarsmen. And the deputy headmaster was Mr. Casey. And he was my saving grace, and he had about this wild Kerry man that was in the class. And he took me under his wing. And he got me into boxing. It was a famous school for boxing. And he got me into boxing, and as it turned out, I was a very good British amateur boxer. But it was all down to Mr. Casey. And I remember I got into the Wilton Championships, and this started giving me encouragement. And I got into the Wilton Championships, and I was, oh yeah, I remember the guy that was sitting next to me, the first day I sat at school, I'd never seen a coloured person. Never saw a coloured person in my life. And there right next to me was a coloured person, and I was looking at him and I said, Jesus, do you know, what's this, do you know? And I'll never forget his name, Kenneth St. Hilaire. And I was in the Wilton Championship, and who should I be boxing was Kenneth St. Hilaire. And I remember Mr. Casey saying to me, he was a better boxer than me, and he said, John, he said, we have to win this, he said. We'll Kerry people, we're proud. We have to beat him. But he said he's very good. And we devised a plan how to beat him. And Mr. Casey was a science teacher. And he said the weakest part of a coloured person's body, he said, is their ankle. And I said, how the name of God like my body? I can't get that going to hit him in the ankle. So he said, no, John, he said, you box him into a corner. And he said, you ankle tap him. And he said, automatically when you ankle tap him, he says his jaw will come down. He said, that's your chance to knock him out. And in the second round, this is when it was supposed to happen, and I nearly got knocked out in the first round. I got into the second round, and I got him into a corner, and ankle tapped him and hit him, and I knocked him out. And it was from there then I got encouragement. I went on to win a lot of championships. years afterwards, I was in, would you believe this, I was in America. I was in New York. And I was in a bar in New York, and this guy comes in, and he was sitting next to me, and he was a coloured guy. And he said to me, "You Johnny," that's what he was calling me, "You Johnny." And I said, and I looked at him, he said, "I'm Ken St. Hilaire." That's how things worked out. Well, we didn't get into a row. That's why I never lost my accent. And that's why I have great admiration for this part of the country. Because I met a lot of people, I travelled a lot. I was in Australia, New Zealand, America, the Middle East, I was in Eastern Europe, all over. And I remember I was in a place called Newcastle, that's outside Sydney in Australia. And the first man I met inside the pub there was a man from Ballybofey. And that's a long time ago, that's about over 40 years ago. And he had a strong Donegal accent. And he recognised me straight away, he said, "You were killing me." And I knew he was a Donegal. And that's the one thing that we have lost. Especially down our part of the world, I think we've lost our accents, we've lost our, that's why I like coming up to this part of the country, because everybody is held deep to their, where they come from, which I think is very important. And I always found that, some of my family were born in New York, and some of my daughters, and some of them were born in London. And my eldest daughter was born next door to people from Connemara, and she's a fluent Gaelic speaker. And this is how the name Sasta came around. My daughter picked out the name. Now, that's a long, long time ago. And as I say, I get 40 years in construction, and I was doing very well. I was doing extremely well. I was doing so well that my business was nearly turning over 2 million a year. And I was within, this is a fact, I was within shouting distance of finishing up. I said if I had one more year, I'd have had $1.5 million in the bank. And I had no bank borrowings, I'd finished and I'd started up some deals. And then, all of a sudden, the slum came. And the people that got me were the people that I trusted the most. There was one particular company I did work for here in Dublin. And I knew the man personally for almost 35 years. And I'd been abroad with him. I ran jobs for him. I'd been a subcontractor. I was in shuttering and I was in concrete work. And that was mostly what I used to do. And in one particular job, I got caught for 750,000. In another job, I got caught for 300. In another job, I got caught for 200. This was all in the space of 6 months. And I was wiped out. And I remember going to the man, and I said to him, I said, "Look, please," I said, "you know the position I'm in." And he said, "Look, man," I said, "I'm going to burst this, and I can do nothing about it." And I remember what Dan said while ago there. One thing I regret was I wasn't ruthless enough. I was too trusting. I was too loyal. I came from a different background. I came from a background where honesty and respect and loyalty, we were taught that. And unfortunately that doesn't prevail in businesses. So if I had a second time around, I'd be more ruthless. And I regret it. But then, if it's not in you, it's not in you. And I remember this guy, I still work for him, and I was known as a problem solver. I could go to any part of the world. And I was a good construction man. I had no qualifications in anything. And this is what people want to realise. When I was going to school here, when my mother died, I was going to national school, and I left before primary set. I was into an auntie in London, and I went to school there, and I left before the exams. I left there, and I went to New York, and I went to school there for a while, and I left there before the exam. I never actually passed or sat. I don't even know what it is to sit down and pass an exam, or to do an exam. And that's not being an end-all of everything. You don't have to be degrees and qualifications and the whole. But I remember saying to the guy, "Please, do not help me," and he couldn't. So I said, "What am I going to do?" I'd lost everything. And I remember I was called in by two bank managers, an executive and a bank manager. And I remember this guy, he said to me, "Remember, like, I employed 50 people, and I was the only only person at the end of the day I was entitled to nothing, because I was self-employed. Everybody else that I had working for me had their contributions, and I worked diligently, and I made sure that everybody was paid and they had their dues, and I paid suppliers, and I paid everything, and I left myself with nothing. And I remember I was called in by this executive from this bank manager, and I remember this guy saying to me, he said, and this guy was a bad egg. He's a bad name. And I remember he said to me, he said, how was I going to get out of, I had to pay back money to the banks. And I remember he said to me, he said, what's your plan? How do you intend paying us back our money? So I said to him, I said, I'm going to start a food business. And he started laughing at me. And he said, a construction man started a food business. I said, yeah. I said, I'm going to start a food business. And he said, what? I said, I'm going to make sausages and black and white puddings. And he said, I don't believe this. He said, look, and I always remember, he turned around the fall and he said to me, please, he said, write something down there. He said, I want this for my bosses in Dublin. And I want something that I can send back to them. And I don't want them getting on to me. And I remember looking at this guy, and behind his back was, he had degrees, he had a gown, he had a hat, and he had all these awards and the whole lot. And I remember he had this thing on top of his head. It was like a wig or something. And there was a guy next to him, and he was completely different to the guy I was talking to. He was a complete opposite. Slick black hair, sunglasses on top of the head, and the complete opposite. And I thought to myself, this guy had given about 5 minutes and something. And now he said to me, he said, write down there, he said, what you want to do. So I said to him, I said, right. I said, I'd change the pattern. I said, I'm going to start any business. I'm not going to start food business. I said, I'm going to do a totally different thing altogether. And he said, what? So I said to him, celebrant figs. So he said, what's the name about it? He said, it's a celebrant fig. I said, it's a wig. I said, it's that thing you up on top of your head. And I said, if you're not careful, I said, I'll stick it down the other guy's throat. I really meant that, you know what I mean, because of 3 months previous to that, a very good friend of mine that came from County Tyrone, and we first met in Australia. And we were in the same business together. And he was called in by the same people. And 3 weeks afterwards he committed suicide. And I had a personal grudge against these two people. And I mean, banks have an awful lot to answer for. And it's not the banks, it's actually the people that work in these places. Like people say the banks, it's the actual people that work in these places that destroy people. And I knew this guy was dead set in destroying me. And as I was going out the door, he said, you're finished. And he said, we'll make sure, he said, that you are finished. And he said, we're going to get everything off. So I said, fine. So, anyway, I started the business. And it was a struggle because we had nothing. My wife was working 3 jobs. I actually started bagging manure, horse manure, and seaweed. And I started selling to garden centres, and I was going around door to door. And at the same time, I started doing up a building. And there was people saying to me, you're mad, John, this will never work. How are you going to take on the likes of Clonic, Kilty and all the top producers? I said, I'll take them on. And I'll win, and I'll beat them. And I'll outsell them. And pure determination and fire in the belly, and the thing again, ruthlessness, I suppose, it was in me, but I said I have to bring it out. And I did. And I started it, and I remember the first day I went to a farmer's market in Glenbell, that's in County Kerry. It's on the ring in Kerry. And I had about 50 kilos of stuff between sausages and puddings, and I started doing tastings. And within an hour I was sold out. I couldn't believe it. And I remember that morning when I went to the farmer's market, and I'm a very early riser. I'm up every morning before 5 o'clock. I never sleep after 5, like the Eagle Rays. And I remember I had set up my stall, but I had set up in the wrong place. I'd actually set up in the football field. And I shouldn't have been inside the football field, I should have been outside it. And I remember the people that was organised that came along, and they looked in, and they said, what's that inside there? And I said, that's my tent. I said, I'm going to sausages and puddings. And I remember this lady said to me, get that out of there. Well, yeah, first of all, she said to me, how did you get it in there? I said, I got it in the gate. She said, I couldn't have got it in the gate because the gate is locked. And the gate was locked. but I threaded it in through the gate, and I had a ladder on the back. I climbed in over the gate and I set it up, and there we were standing inside in the middle of the car. And I remember she said to me, and this other guy, big ginger-haired fellow, and he said to me, he said, we don't get that out of there, he said, we'll call the guards. And ironically, it wasn't the spot car was passing. I said, you don't have to. He said, I'm just passing. So, we got it out, and I moved it along. And as I said, within an hour and a half, I sorted it out. And I was absolutely over the moon. I was delighted. I had money. And I knew I had a business. And the following Sunday, I got double the amount, and within an hour, I was sorted out again. I thought this was incredible. You know, I said, I want something here. And I was delighted as well for my wife, because my wife had worked so hard. And you know, I felt sorry for her. And because she kind of doubted me as well, but I wouldn't blame her, because I get 12 months going up the building and working and trying to get it going. And we got it going. So I entered the National Irish Food Awards in Dingle. And I remember there was another business. I had a stall, I had 2 stalls. My daughter had 1 stall, and I had another stall myself. Because there was a big lot of people there, and we had a whole lot of stuff, and we were selling a lot of stuff, but I was shortlisted for the awards. And I remember this guy came along to me, and he said to me, he said, you were Sasta. Today I am. And he said, you think that you're going to win something at this competition? Well, I said, look, I said, we're shortlisted. I said, we're all shortlisted. And he tasted my product. I remember this guy now was an executive, he was the top director of the company, and he said to me, you haven't a chance. He said, there's too much salt in the product. Well, I said, look, I said, we'll wait at 4 o'clock. We'll see. At 4 o'clock, and within about 10 minutes, our category came up. I won 2 gold medals in silver, but I won nothing. Nothing. And I couldn't leave it go with the guy. I went up to him. And I said to him, how did you come to the conclusion that our product would win? And I said, you were an executive, you were a director, and you were an expert in the food business. And well, he said, look, he said, I said, there's no salt in my product. And there wasn't. I said, I can tell you this now. I said, if you were working for me, I said, I'd have you out that door so quick. I said, your feet couldn't touch the ground, because I said, you're an absolute disgrace, I said, to your profession. And I meant it, because I have no time for anybody that goes around pretending to get something that they're not. And that's why I was very good at my business. I was very good at construction. And I done other things. I had mini-cab businesses, I ran pubs. I used to be bouncer in dance halls, doors. And everything that I'd done, I had to be the best. When I was in the dance halls and the doors, I went away and I trained in martial arts. Because if anybody came up to me, I'd have to be better than them. I had a mini-cab business, and I had a very good mini-cab business. But I developed it, and I remember Dan talking about Mercedes. I bought a Mercedes car, and I done it up, but I went from the top. I went for a different customer. I didn't go for guys that would be in pubs that would be out of dance halls, and I'd have to be fighting to try and get the money off them. I went for the top. And everything I'd done, and that's when I started the food business. I said, if I'm going to make it at this, I have to be better than everybody else. And I proved it the first year in the Dingle Food Fair, when we won the 3 awards. And I remember one Sunday, this French guy came up to me. I didn't know about this competition, it was in France. And the French man came up to me and he said to me, he said, you're good on your, that's the white pudding, beautiful. We should go to France and enter the competition. He gave me the details. And I entered it and I sent it off. And then I win top prize for white pudding. And I could not believe this. We were invited over to France in a place Normandy, Alençon. And the reception we got, I could not believe it. We were treated and we were looked after, and there was bands along the street, and we were there, and I thought to myself, Jesus, this is fantastic. And it was. And then when I looked at who we had beat,